All right, I am here to present the award for Athlete of the Year. By far the most important award, in my opinion, which is why I put my name on the sign-up sheet next to this award to present it. The nominees are an incredible bunch. Awesome performances this year across all of Denver sports. Memorable ones that I think we're going to look back on for the rest of our lives. I don't mean to be dramatic, but I'm dead serious. And the nominees for Athlete of the Year at the 2020 Goaties, really the only award that matters in my opinion. Nathan MacKinnon from the Colorado Avalanche. Jamal Murray for his incredible performance in the NBA bubble last fall. Garett Bowles, an incredible comeback story with the Denver Broncos. And Jarek Broussard, the University of Colorado running back.
All right, guys, let's talk Athlete of the Year. And I mean, what I love about the guys nominated in this category is we've got some great on the court, on the ice, on the field performances, but just some really notable stories that followed those athletes off the playing surface as well. Let's start with you, Rudo. When it comes to Nathan MacKinnon, what's his argument in your mind for Athlete of the Year?
Well, for the Avs, you can pencil in Nathan MacKinnon almost any year at this point, but I think he really started to transcend just being an elite Colorado Avalanche player into there's an argument for him as the best player in the NHL entirely this year. We've seen very few players do what Nathan MacKinnon did with a team as injured as Colorado was last season. I don't know if you guys remember the movie Most Valuable Primate from the early 2000s where they made a monkey play hockey, but essentially Nathan MacKinnon could make that monkey look like an elite hockey player if he wanted to. He played with everyone in the Avs lineup and made them all produce at a high level, not just himself, who had 93 points in 69 games, by the way, which isn't too bad. But he made his entire team better and carried them through stretches where they had almost no one else left from their core of players. And then more importantly, and the reason that he gets put over the top is he was unbelievable in the playoffs. And I know there are a couple of other players that we'll talk about that kind of did the same thing, but MacKinnon going on a 14-game point streak in the playoffs, just automatic, night in, night out, 25 points in 15 games, including 9 goals. He became the best player in this, I don't want to say since 2000. There were some great seasons at the start of it, but certainly in this iteration of the Avs, the last decade, far and away the best player on the Avs.
I feel like he just ascended to potentially the best player in the NHL. I mean, for me, more of a casual fan, seemingly like overnight. I mean, yeah. I'm sure for you it was much more of a process, but I mean, for him to be just 25 years old and already be at the top of his game, and he's got so many amazing years ahead of him. That's wild. It's wild.
Yeah, I think that's the key to why he's going to be the player of the year every year for the foreseeable future. Is he's just starting to enter his prime as a hockey player, and he's yet to hit a 100-point season, and that's coming. Don't worry about it. He'll get there, and his teammate quality is only going to get better in the immediate future. So yeah, he's on a rocket ship to the moon right now.
So, I mean, Rudo, where does he go from here if he's already, borderline the best player in the league? And like Harrison said, he's, still so young.
Yeah, I mean, he needs to win a Hart Trophy, an actual MVP trophy. He's been snubbed on that twice. And then help the Avs win a Stanley Cup. I don't know. There's not really that much higher he can go other than that. So it's going to be a fun couple of years.
Do you think that someday, if he stays with the Avs, he stays on this level, we're talking about him as the greatest Av to come through?
Yes. Yeah. We talked about this last week. He's already at 500 points as an NHL player. If he plays out his career in Colorado, he will pass Joe Sakic's records. I don't think it'll even be that close. So a lock to be retired as an Av. Very good chance he ends up as a Hall of Famer. He's going to be a legend for sure.
Mason Zach, when it comes to Garrett Bowles, I mean, this is the guy who was much maligned last year. The butt of like every joke, it seemed, and has like an extraordinary turnaround season. I mean, just watching that story from afar, it was incredible.
It was incredible. And I mean, we're talking about athlete of the year, athlete of 2020. And in 2020, Garett Bolles' fifth-year option was turned down by the Broncos. Essentially, the Broncos said, we don't want you on our team after this year. That happened in 2020, the year that we're giving this award for. The Broncos said, you haven't lived up to our standards as a first-round pick, so this may be your last year with us. And what does he do, Mace? I mean, just in a couple of months, he turns around and says, oh, yeah, you don't want me next year at a discount? Well, you're going to have to pay me 4 years, $17 million a year. Just an incredible turnaround for Garrett.
Well, when they declined the fifth-year option on him, the party line that they were promoting was there's going to be a competition at left tackle between Garett Bolles and Elijah Wilkinson. And Wilkinson, of course, battled injuries. But if there had been a competition, it would have been a rout in much the same way that the Broncos lost to the Seahawks. The Seahawks would have been Garett Bolles in that situation. Dominant. Did not allow a sack all year, according to the metrics by Pro Football Focus. Dominant as that bookend tackle, that blindside protector for Drew Lock. I think the question going into the year was, okay, he played well late in 2019 for those 5 games that Drew Lock started. Was he a product of Drew Lock having the ability to not simply be a statue like Joe Flacco, for example? Or was it legit improvement from Garett Bolles? The answer was legitimate improvement. And also, I mean, you could make a case for Mike Munchak being assistant coach of the year in the market for what he did with Garett Bolles alone. He's turned a guy who looked like he was headed toward being a bust into one of the top 3 left tackles in football.
Exactly. And he was snubbed of a Pro Bowl this year. He'll probably get that next year if he plays the same way he did. He got an All-Pro, got the big-time contract, and did it where he didn't have an offseason to work with Mike Munchak and the coaching staff, of course, because of COVID eliminated that. So how did he get better? Well, he was having his wife in his kitchen set up as a pass rusher and blocking her. So he did it in the very most unconventional way, but was able to turn what started as a bad year for him, an embarrassing year, to go on with all the boos into one that turned into $68 million.
Yeah, to his credit. Go ahead.
Are you guys ready to trust it? Like is one season of watching Garett Bolles play that well enough for you to say, like, it's going to stick around? He's going to be this good going forward?
You know, there's 68 million reasons why you would think that he'd stick with it.
Well, the thing is, that contract, $17 million a year, it sounds like a lot, but it doesn't make him the highest paid or even the second highest paid left tackle in the game right now. And he could have said, I don't want to sign this. The Broncos could have given him the franchise tag, and he could have been on a prove-it year. And if he'd done the same thing if he does the same thing in 2021 he did in 2020, you'd be talking about somebody pushing to $20 million a year, because that's where left tackle salaries are going. If he plays as he did this past year, it's going to be a bargain. I think he may not be top 2 or 3, but he's going to be in the top handful of tackles, I think, for the next few years. And that means he's going to be more than worth the contract that he's giving him. The other thing I would do with the Broncos, I mentioned Mike Munchak earlier. I would make sure that Mike Munchak is around for as long as Garett Bolles is on this team, because I don't want to see what happens without one of the great O-line whisperers there in his ear. And also not only great at being a technical coach, but also somebody who has the right demeanor. He's very calm, kind of soothing, and that's what Garett Bolles needed to hear.
How important is that steady hand going forward, whether it's Drew Lock continuing back there or if the Broncos decide to go a different direction?
As long as you have a quarterback who's just basically not a statue back there in the pocket, I think that'll help Garett Bolles. I think that the problem with Bolles early in the 2019 season is that Flacco had no pocket presence, no escapability, was drifting in the pocket, and it was a nightmare for any offensive tackle. Whether it's Drew Lock or somebody else that you bring in on the market. I mean, let's say they go for a young hedge like a Jameis Winston, perhaps, or they go for an older hedge like a Tyrod Taylor or Andy Dalton. At least you're talking about guys that can get away just enough and have that pocket presence to where I don't think Bowles would take a step back himself.
Hank, when it comes to Jarek Broussard, I mean, this guy came out of nowhere. It felt like to have an unbelievable season. Give us the rundown on Jarek and what was most impressive to you about his season.
Yeah, I mean, it was just the storyline is what is so cool to me. Just how all of this played out. You know, there were a lot of questions coming into the season. New head coach with Carl Durrell after Mel Tucker left really late, well after most of the coaches were hired. And it was kind of a tough situation to come in late and then to have every single one of your spring practices canceled and to go through all this sort of stuff. But you knew that you had a couple of things in place. And one of the things you knew you had in place was Alex Fontenot, who was the returning running back, the second leading rusher in the entire Pac-12 in terms of returners. And that just seemed to be where the offense was going. He was coming off, I think, 1,000-yard season. But then he tore his ACL right before the season started. And nobody really knew what to expect from that point going forward. There were some young recruits. And then you start hearing the stories that Jarek Broussard is playing really well in camp. That this guy who's coming off of 2 torn ACLs hasn't played a down, has barely even practiced with the Buffs in the time that he's been at Colorado. He's looking like himself. And the offensive coordinator is saying, like, you know, when we recruited him, he was one of the best zone runners I'd ever seen. And he's starting to kind of look like that guy. And so you start going through the season and it opens with UCLA and he gets the ball 31 times, picks up 187 yards and 3 touchdowns in a game that nobody thought, well, not nobody, but very few people thought UCLA or the Buffs were going to win. And it just kept going from there to 121, to 124, to 301. And it was just this incredible story. And he winds up being the Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year. He was the Mayo Clinic National Comeback Player of the Year. And it was just an awesome story and awesome to see him get a chance to actually play the sport that he's wanted to play for a few years now.
So, Hank, it makes me ask the question of what does the backfield look like next year with all the competition? I mean, it's got to be a great problem to have.
Yeah, it's actually incredible. And just a couple days ago, Jaron Mangum, who was the number 2 back this year and last year as well, entered the transfer portal. So he won't be back. But they picked up Ashad Clayton last year, who's like this superstar running back, really. Like you look through like the all-decade team for Louisiana high school football, and it's him and it's Leonard Fournette and it's Alvin Kamara, I think, as the 3 running backs. And so he comes in as a 4-star, and he didn't even get to see the field much this year. But then you have Alex Fontenot coming back. You have Jarek Broussard coming back. So it's going to be pretty cool to see what that backfield looks like next year. What's
the ceiling for Jarek Broussard going forward?
That's kind of tough to say. You know, the big question is really the size. You know, 5'9", 185. Can he make it work at the next level? And, you know, he's so quick and he doesn't take hits head on. I mean, I definitely wouldn't be the one to doubt him. You know, the last time that happened, number 23 coming out of Colorado gets doubted because of his size. Phil Lindsay, and we know how that's going. So, I mean, the ceiling for Jarek, it's big because he's fast, and that's what everybody likes. And as long as he stays healthy, which obviously has been an issue, he should be good to go going forward.
Love it. To wrap up the nominees, I'll speak on Jamal Murray with the Nuggets. And it's funny because even with like Jamal Murray's run the bubble, Nikola Jokic, I think, was still the Nuggets' best player throughout the playoffs. But Jamal Murray was like Mr. Bubble it really started in the Jazz series, him leading the 3-1 comebacks, the pair of 50-point games. What he did just kind of off the court, the emotional post-game speech after Game 6, which I think is just still the moment that we all think back on when looking at the Nuggets playoff run in the bubble. It's just kind of synonymous with Murray and the level that he just raised his game to from where he was in the regular season. And that was really the wrap on the Nuggets. They were this really good team, but to make a playoff run to potentially the Western Conference Finals, they needed that other guy to become a star next to Nikola Jokic. And Jamal Murray took that question and just totally ran with it and became that guy. So his run in the bubble is so memorable. And I think he's got a great case to be to be athlete of the year. And like, he's been up and down a little bit throughout this regular season. And I'm just kind of wondering to myself if that's the type of guy he'll be in the regular season, and then he'll just be like this unbelievable playoff performer. I'm wondering if that's going to be his career trajectory, but we'll see.
Well, that'd be a great thing for the Nuggets if that's what he turned out to be. And I mean, this could be something that we're looking back on in 10 or 15 years, saying that bubble was where Jamal Murray turned from a star to a superstar. And that's exactly what the Nuggets needed. And I mean, that's just something that you think of when you think of the bubble. You think of Jamal Murray's potential transformation into the superstar.
And not only that, but kind of beyond. You think back to Game 6 against the Jazz when he goes for 50 and the interview. I mean, as much as I remember and think about what Jamal Murray did on the court, it's that interview. It's the emotion. Yeah. It's the eloquence with which he spoke about George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the shoes that he wore. That may have been the defining moment positively for any Denver athlete this year, was how he handled that situation so well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the guy from where he was at the start of last season to when that season finished in the bubble, the guy grew up. He just like flat out grew up. He grew into the Jamal Murray that we all know now, from what he did on the court to, like you said, Mace, what he did just kind of representing himself and the Nuggets and the NBA community during the social justice movement. It will stick with me forever, for sure.
I mean, I think the big selling point over maybe even Nathan MacKinnon for Murray is he conquered the demon. They beat the LA Clippers and made the conference finals. If they both retired tomorrow, Nathan MacKinnon hasn't made a conference finals. Jamal Murray has.
Yeah. All right, a lot of great nominees. Let's check out the winner.
And the 2020 Goatee for Athlete of the Year goes to Nathan MacKinnon from the Colorado Avalanche. Probably the first of about 10 of these that he's going to win.